welcome back to episode
Three.
Yes, I'm getting confused because we did it in episode 0. Episode 3 of the In Our Headspace podcast. And I won't be starting it off today. I think Jared has something he wants to say. I already forgot. He told me beforehand, but I already forgot what it was. So with that said, take it away, Jared. What do you want to talk about?
All right. First of all, I don't even remember. There was something happened. I don't remember what it was now that made me want to talk about this. But I sat there and I was like, oh, I was just thinking about time.
Yeah.
You know, we are turning of age here soon for alcohol.
Yes.
And
6 weeks.
You know, it happened all so fast.
What did? Just
Us,
turning,
like,
just growing up?
yeah, because I remember, 18, you're 18,
yes.
blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. I know what you mean.
And
I feel
now,
that way too.
And now it's like all of a sudden, it's like, oh, here we are.
21 already.
We're almost.
It's been 3 years.
Yeah. I feel like it went by super fast. And,
yeah.
like, this also goes back to what we've talked about before, being in loops and habits.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe that's why time seems to go by so fast, or a part of it. But if I were to ask you, 18, 19.
Yeah.
Would you say it went by fast?
Yes. For me, I'll give 2 answers to that. So first one is, yes, it feels like I just graduated high school and I just turned 18, but it's been 3 years.
Yeah.
Secondly, if you were to ask me when I was 18, if it was going to be a short time before 21, no. Because at the time I was like, I'm 18, I've still got 21 to go, and that's not for another 3 years.
Yeah.
Ugh. And here we are 3 years later, like, oh, geez. So, and you can continue your thought, but I will say I do have one other thought on why that happens, but
Okay.
that's kind of a tangent. So continue what you were saying.
Yeah. And so, because I was sitting there, this is, I think, February.
Mm-hmm.
I had a dream where I was all of a sudden turning 21, even though literally last month in February, that's when I turned 20.
Right, like a month after you just.
And so
turned
it's
20.
basically a year from now, from that time in February. It's like I got a long time to go until I turn 21. But then I had this dream where I all of a sudden turned 21. I was like, well, what the hell happened?
Right.
It literally
that year just went by.
It almost literally felt like a year of my life was just taken away from me.
That's scary. Yeah.
And it was scary because I was thinking, I was like, wait, in that dream, I was literally thinking, what did I do with my life during that year that went by so fast?
That's how I felt in 2019, actually.
Yeah.
I felt it on a micro level in 2018 when I was at that warehouse job. And 6 months went by and I was like, whoa, it's been 6 months. Like, what have I been doing? Literally, I'd been doing nothing but waking up, going to work, coming home, sleeping, and then eating when I needed to. And that was it for 6 months. But then 2019 specifically was like the beginning of 2019. And it hit me that I was coming up on a year out of high school and I still hadn't gotten close to what I was wanting to do. And it's funny because I ended up getting my job as a video editor, I think exactly 1 year from graduating.
Okay.
It was June 3rd, and we graduated June 2nd. So, our graduation celebration thing. So, that was pretty cool. But anyways, yeah, it was that exact. And I talked about this before, and I think it was episode 1 or 2, where I was like, I almost gave up on trying to go the route I was going, and I was starting to be skeptical of my decision to not go to college. But then, and that was in April of 2019. Yes. So we graduated 2018, went all the way through to 2019, and then 4 months into 2019, I was still like, it's not working, and I was like getting so frustrated, and then it hit me, and now it's like, yes, time is flying, but in a good way. Like I can look back on the rest of that year and most of this year and be like, aside from the pandemic, I can be like, man, this has been like a very eventful, fulfilling year. Because in 2019, after I got that job, I took a trip to Vegas. I took a trip to Salt Lake. I took a trip to Nashville. I went on three business trips, I guess you could call them. And then I also did like multiple events and stuff like that, where it felt like I was actually doing something. And then, so the time did fly, but it's because I was so busy. And I was also doing that YouTube stuff with Cameron, which made me feel like pretty good. And I was like, anyways, I was moving towards, but I think the main thing that was in my way at that time was my living situation wasn't optimal. I was super stressed about it all the time.
It's like a shit job.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Well, before that, but I'm talking about like while I was like feeling good.
Okay.
But anyways, yeah, I think it's interesting that there's two different ways that time can fly, and it can fly in like a really scary, like time's going too fast way, or it can be like a, wow, I've been so busy that this much time has passed, and like it feels good that I'm making so much progress. But it can still be scary, but I think as a young adult, it's less scary than it would be if I'm like towards the higher end, like whenever I do end up getting kids, that's going to put even just my niece, blowing my mind that she's going to be turning 4 days before I turn 21. Like obviously it's only been 4 years, but I vividly remember like the night she came home from the hospital, and like I contributed to like her first, like raising her in her first year of life, and like we've been super close. And then I was with her last night at the like with my parents and everything at the races. And it was like, now she's talking in full sentences, and like, because your brother's close to the same age, your youngest.
Yeah.
So it's like, it's just weird that they're becoming like, they're even going through the toddler stage so fast of just like, I was in high school. I remember it was 2016, just turned 17 years old, and like things were so different.
Mm-hmm.
And that was before like I felt like I started going on a good track, because that was junior year. I was losing a lot of motivation in school. It wasn't like quite there yet. I think second semester was when that really hit. But
we were
like,
in the same boat.
Yeah,
I remember.
But I was kind of in a good spot, but I was still like not mentally like matured in terms of insecurities and social interactions and stuff. But then like the rest, like the second half of that year, or I guess the beginning half of 2018 or 2017, sorry. I had gone through like a really hard time, and then a really good time, and then I've kind of been in like a pretty good spot since. But like, it's just weird that like another thing is we hit our 3-year anniversary, like Mia and I did, in May.
I remember when you were talking about when you guys were talking before you guys even started dating.
Oh yeah, well yeah, because we had done BPA.
Yep.
This video competition thing that we did in high school. We did it for 2 years. First year, we actually made it through regionals with what I think was our worst video. Then we put a ton of effort into our second video. It wasn't great. Like, it wasn't good. But, like, there was a lot of, like, work and effort that went into it. It was a lot of fun. But, like,
I want to do something like that again, by the way.
I do, too.
Because it was fun.
Yes. Which... keep an eye out on it. We might be doing some projects. But then the following year, 2017 to 2018, which was our senior year, that one was a crushing defeat, because we didn't make it past regionals, and we had put so much
it was
time
literally
and
just
effort.
because of credits.
And we forgot to put credits at the end of the video.
I remember
and we lost by 1 point.
All
and we didn't
three of
make
us
it.
analyzed that paper for the requirements. We
literally went through it so much.
Because Caleb, I think it was Caleb. He said like, I think we have to have this in the video. I was like, I don't think so.
Oh my!
And so we
God.
disagreed. And so that's why we all looked at the paper because we're trying to find whatever it was.
Oh yeah, because it was like we have to have an interview.
Yeah, something like that. It was something like that.
And then it was like, well, does it have to be specifically an interview or does it have to be information? And we combed through and we're like, okay, we have this, we have this, we have this, we have this. Oh, we do need an interview. Okay, we have this, we have this, we have this. And we went through a checklist, and the one thing, which is really dumb for us to miss, but like the one thing we missed was the thing that's in every video project ever made, which was credits.
A minute, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
like
it literally was typing 3 names.
The easiest part of the whole video, and we just didn't do it.
And here's the thing, like the judge, I have a story about the judge, by the way, that you don't know about, Jared. But,
oh man.
So we had one judge who was super cool, and we had another judge.
I think you told me the story.
Who was a volunteer judge who wasn't necessarily fully qualified, and he wasn't super professional about it. But the story that I have to tell you is my coworker. So I told you about how my coworker is essentially our same. He's 1 year above us, but he was also born in 1999. Anyways, we're very close in age. We competed at BPA with him.
Yes.
That was his last year competing in BPA, but it was our first year competing in BPA.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other thing was, he knew the judge that judged our BPA project.
The girl?
Yeah, because they were in the same grade.
Yeah.
And then, so it makes sense that she was out of high school by the time we were in our senior year, which means she had time to go and be the judge for BPA.
Yeah.
And she was our judge. So it's just funny. It's like all connected. It's like a small world. But yeah, she liked it. She apparently, according to our teacher, she defended us super hard, but it was by technicality almost. Like no matter how much effort and how, I'm not going to say it was like amazing, but considering the fact that we were high school students and we were like our limited resources and our limited skill at the time, like I think it turned out amazing.
We had a cool idea and we were ambitious about it. And we certainly tried. Yeah,
for sure. And someone else who was less ambitious about it, I think, in my opinion, made it through. But I think we did have one thing that was good is like our friends won broadcasting pretty freaking hard that
Nationals.
year. Yeah, they won nationals. So that's a good thing.
Could have been us.
It's not about us. It's not always about us. But like, it does suck when you put so much time and effort and like you're super passionate about this thing and then you lose due to a technicality, and it's like, that was hard to swallow in the moment. That's for sure. We had to go take a little lunch break and to cool our heads. But
Jimmy John's, I think.
Yep, it was Jimmy John's. But I don't know.
I thought the drive back was fun.
Yeah, see, we were all in a way better mood by the end of it, and it's still a fun day. Like, I always loved those days where we didn't have to go to school, and we just, because it was a 3-day thing. It was day 1, day 2, and so it was like day 1 I think was a Thursday, day 2 was Friday, day 3 was a Saturday, and anyways, the reason we were talking about BPA, I just realized, is because the day our first year of BPA in 2017, the third day when we lost at state. That's when I messaged Mia, and then we started talking, and now, anyways, back to the whole time thing. What I was going to say about the reason we feel the passage of time is so weird is because when you're young, a month feels like an eternity.
Yeah.
A week even feels super long. But as you get older, days feel shorter, weeks feel shorter, months feel shorter, and eventually years. And I think the reason is because it's all a perception, a scaling of perception where you've experienced so many days in your life by that point that you're like, it's nothing. It's like everybody knows the transition from working part-time to full-time, when you first work full time, it feels like forever. And then then you work full time for like a month or two and you're like, oh, okay, this isn't very long at all because you're so used to it. But going from only ever working part time to working full time is a really hard transition. And I think that's a very scaled down, like simplified version of how we, by the time you're 16, here's something. So it's been 4 years since my niece was born. I'll use that example because I was just talking about it. When I was 16, 4 years was a long time because 4 years was 1/4 of my entire life.
Yeah.
And 4 years still is a long time, but like the feeling of it, like from my transition from 12 to 16 was so jam-packed full of puberty and life experiences and all that at the time 4 years felt like a really, really long time. But now 4 more years have passed. It's now been 8 years since I was 12. And yes, a lot has happened, but like it kind of starts to stretch out and less development time goes between when I was 16 and 20. Yes, there was a ton of development time. There's a ton of like transition into adulthood, but like it felt a lot less crammed in because there's a lot, I don't know, it's a lot more spread out.
Yeah.
And my perception of it then becomes more sped up because, oh, it's just another year. I've already experienced a year. Especially living on your own, you tend to fill your own time instead of being on someone else's schedule, as if like when you're in high school and you're on the school schedule and then you're on your parents' schedule and then you're on your own schedule. And then it's like all of these different things. There's constantly like somewhere to be.
Yeah.
And then you get out of high school and the main thing you have to worry about is work and entertaining yourself and paying your bills. It's like all of a sudden time flies because you're not really paying attention to what day it is. And it's so hard to like I was kind of blown away I that today is the 20th September already.
Yeah.
Which, okay, I guess that's a behind the scenes of when we're recording this. But it's just funny that you can lose track of time if you look away from it for a second. And my dad had described it to me like one day you're going to wake up and you're going to be in your 40s. And you're going to be like, whoa.
That's what I always thought about. I know I'm going to wake up and like, oh, I'm on my deathbed.
Yeah.
That's how I always view it. I'm like, I'm going to wake up and be like, oh, shit, I'm almost dead now.
And it's like, yes, I definitely agree with like, live your life to the fullest. But that doesn't always translate the same for everybody. That doesn't mean travel the world and go to all these places and do all these things. It's just, and I said this before, and I know I kind of say it a lot, but like the intent, live with intent, do everything you do for a reason. And that's all you got to do to live your life to the fullest. Like if you know why you're doing something, then you're doing it for a reason, which means you're getting what you can out of your life. And everyone's in certain specific circumstances to where they can't always fall into that category of making the like living your life to the fullest and having all these great experiences. Because for me personally, yes, I want to travel the world, but I don't necessarily want to go travel for months at a time. I'd want to go to like one place at a time and then have breaks in between it. Maybe that's just because I'm way more introverted, and it makes me, I guess it drains my energy more to be away from home and be away from like my more comfort environment, where other people can be energized by it and be like, oh, it's so exciting and new experiences, and I'm seeing all these amazing things. And the thing is, I really want to, because I'm so interested in world history as far as like ancient civilizations go. And it would be super cool for me to go and visit Greece.
We should go to South America.
Or South America, yeah.
Let's go look at the Aztec temples or Mayan temples.
I want to, but it's also kind of sketchy down there.
That's all right.
In certain areas, I guess. But I think there's also that like cautious side of my brain. I'm super cautious about a lot of things. So I think like worst case scenario, I'm like, oh, well, you're in another country. someone screws you over, you're just stuck there, and you can't get back to America. So like,
that's one thing that also scares me.
Yeah,
I wouldn't mind going to Singapore. It's considered like one of the safest countries in the world.
Mm-hmm.
It's really nice over there.
Right.
But what's scary about it is how like their law system works.
Oh.
It's very like here in America, you have like your right to a jury, you have your right to time in court.
Mm-hmm.
In Singapore, they have it way different, where it's very like, it's not, I don't know if you'd call it a dictatorship, but it's like, I think it was like 99% of like the court cases that they have, the person's like always guilty.
Oh God.
And like, there was an example, a teenager in Ohio, I think it was 1990. He was visiting his dad because his dad was in Singapore. His dad was on a business trip in Singapore, so his son went to visit him. And the kid was just walking around or something, and he all of a sudden got framed for graffiti. And in Singapore, that's punishment by caning.
Oh,
and
what is caning? Like being beat?
So having a martial artist whip you with a bamboo sword.
Oh,
and I didn't know this. So 5 slashings is your death. So if you get 5 slashes, you die.
Like just
the back, yeah.
You just straight up die.
You die. And so the kid received 3 slashes for graffiti. And so he came back to the U.S. deformed.
Really?
Yes.
Oh my.
Because again, think about the severity. Like 5 slashes is death. So he got 3 slashes. And
how does it kill you just because it severs your...
I have no clue why it kills you.
Weird.
That's what a teacher told me.
That's freaky.
And so, he came back and his mom saw him like that. And she's like, what the fuck?
Oh, hold on. Maybe
this is an American kid.
This is a guy who went to Singapore.
He went to Singapore because he went to visit his dad. His dad was on a business trip to Singapore.
God.
So he came back home and his mom tried to sue Singapore.
You can't, but it's legal in their country.
And so the way they responded with was, we don't care.
Yeah.
Because the whole point, the reason why it's so safe and clean there is because
they're super strict.
Is because of the punishments.
Right.
So he didn't even.
It's led by
They
fear.
found out later that he didn't even do it. He was innocent. He didn't even do anything wrong. He's just wrong place, wrong time.
Yeah.
And the whole point, or their philosophy and how they view their law, is that the reason why things are so safe over there is because people know if you fuck up once, you're going to get the shit beat out of you. And from what I understand, I think like, and I could be wrong, I think like even if you're not fully convicted, they'll like torture you and get you to say you did it, even if you didn't do it. That's why it's like that's why it's like a 99% conviction rate.
That way, there's no like doubt in their decision making, quote unquote. As far as like, oh, they were wrong this one time, so they could be wrong now. But if they're never wrong, then they can't pull that card.
Yeah, because like it's just way different than what we have here in America. Because we have all these rules and all this stuff in place. It's just different ways on how countries operate.
Right.
But I think for a lot of Americans looking at that, we view that as, it's like, oh, that's wrong. That shouldn't be that way.
Right.
Because also in terms of cruel and unusual punishment, that would be a problem if we caned someone.
Yeah. And there's definitely an argument for like, I'm sure there's something, well, there's definitely things America does that also aren't good. But from our perspective, we're more accepting of it because it's where we live. And I can't really think of an example, and I think that's the point. Is like if another country were then to observe what we do over here, and they're like, well, that's wrong, we would be like, well, it's just what we do. Like, maybe this is controversial or not. Death penalty.
Yeah.
Whoever, like, it's already a controversial thing within our own country. I can only imagine how certain countries view it. I mean, obviously, some probably don't care because they probably do things worse.
I think Singapore does it like the day of you're convicted. Because for us, you could have people like legit like years before they're sentenced to death and actually get their death penalty.
Right. And it's funny. I did a debate on it in my debate class. and I'd actually fight for death penalty. And I didn't really have a stance on it before.
Yeah.
But I knew like the general consensus was like it's inhumane. It's just trading a life for a life. An eye for an eye leaves a whole world blind. But
what about your other eye? I'm just messing with you.
Yeah, okay. I was gonna say, but what about your other eye? So I guess my argument within that debate was, if one person values another person's life below their own, why should they have their life valued in high regard? And I guess the point is, if I valued your life lower than mine to the point where I was willing to kill you, why should then the court value my life the same? I think it's if you are willing to take another person's existence away from them, why should yours be valued in the same regard as a normal citizen who did nothing wrong? The other thing is, yes, it's still killing someone. And here's the thing. Even today, like, even though I did this debate, I don't have a fully rounded opinion on it, a clear decision. I just know that, like, I have multiple opinions on the subject. And the other opinion on it is our containment system, like our prison system, is kind of like, I think it's not very efficient.
I think compared to other countries, we have like a high like retention rate or whatever. Like we have a lot of people that just stay in prison compared to a lot of other countries, I think.
So many resources and space. And the biggest thing is space. So who was telling me this? Crap. Someone told me this. I was having a conversation. And it was like, if there's a full prison and there's nowhere else for that prisoner to go, if they take whoever had a lesser crime in that prison than the person who's going in, and they just give them they just let them out. And you can get like 2 years off your sentence if your prison's full and there's someone else with a worse conviction coming in. Just because they don't have room. And I think the biggest problem is there's not enough room. And it's not like, oh, kill all the people, but it's like the other half of that, the other big problem with it is people getting put in prison for things they shouldn't be put in prison for, whether they be innocent or it's just not something worth being put in prison for.
So in my business law class, how it's described to me when we're talking about courts and sentencings, we have like specialized courts where they specialize in certain aspects. Like,
yes,
like we have a veterans court where it's just for veterans. You could have a court for children's court, child's court.
Right.
You could have court on like divorces and stuff. Like you could have all these specialized courts.
Right.
And then there's, I forgot what the terms was, which I need to know this because I'll probably be tested on it here soon. Because then there's other courts that are generalized. So you could, so in the generalized courts, you could have a murder case followed by like some divorce case and then maybe followed by like a tax case.
Right.
And an argument if I'm a person, I don't want to go into a generalized court because that judge, he's going to be like a jack of all trades, but he's not going to
specialize.
He's not going to know every in and out of each individual part,
right? And less experience dealing with situations that you're put in.
Yeah. Now the plus side of it, though, it makes it fast and speedy,
right?
Because it would be an issue if we just had,
if
no one was able to go to court and then it was taking so long, because court in itself is already really long.
It's a huge process,
and so, like, let's just say we have like some sort of criminal case here in a generalized court,
right?
You know. The thing about judges is, well, they're people. They don't want to really be there, honestly. And they're sitting here and they're just hearing, whatever information is presented upon them. And in terms of like maybe like sympathy, like maybe they don't care as much. Like, oh, whatever. Just like, what have people gone before you? Oh, you get like this amount of years. I'll just give you that too. As usually happens. And now, like, let's just say you go to someone in like the veterans court. for like, let's just say two people broke the same law. One person goes to like the general court and they get a typical punishment.
Right.
But then a person goes to veterans court. Like from what I understood, it was the judge in the veterans court will work with you and be like, okay, well, I'm not going to send you to prison. We're going to
find an alternative.
Figure out what to do to fix your problem, so you don't keep repeating it. Because I think my teacher talked about it. He was talking about like in drug cases, like rather than send you to jail, they'll be like, okay, we're going to put you on a plan so you stop doing drugs over and over again.
So I have lots of insight on this one.
Okay.
So my senior project was about the opioid crisis.
Yeah.
And a lot of the research I did talked about how we need to stop just throwing people behind bars for doing drugs. And yes, selling drugs or hurting people while on drugs, I totally get. Like, that's obviously very criminal. But like, there are situations where people just do very illegal drugs, and that's it. Like, they just do them, and that's how they live their life. The problem, like, for example, the one that I researched was heroin. Heroin is a very, very, very extreme drug. And it is one of the hardest things to shake addiction of. So,
because isn't that like, that causes, was it like a neurological dependence as well?
Yes, physical and neurologically. And your withdrawal symptoms are extreme, and they cause you to go crazy because you you have like physical convulsions. You start seeing things. You start like getting really, really, really stressed out, and like the only thing that can numb the pain is more. But the other thing is, the more you do it, the less you feel, blah, blah, blah. That whole thing with most drugs, most hard drugs.
Chasing that high.
Yep. And I guess meth is like one of the only other things that's like way more extreme. But heroin specifically, the thing is, people will have like seizures and stuff caused by them like rotting out their veins, and then create blood clots and all that. And they'll have a stroke or a seizure, and they'll be in a situation where they need, if they just go to the doctor, they can be helped. But if they call an ambulance, it's
a lot of money.
The person getting sent to the ambulance is fine. Like, usually there's like I don't remember what it's called, but like, if you go to the doctor and the doctor knows you're doing something illegal, but you need help because of that illegal thing, the doctor can't say anything. I think they can probably like give testimony to it, but they can't like you come in with a gunshot wound and it's like, oh, I murdered some dude and got shot. The doctor can't be like, oh shit, and call the police. Like, they have to help you and they can't say anything. From what I know, maybe I'm wrong, but that's how I understood it when I was doing this project. And the main reason people won't call an ambulance for the people having these extreme medical problems with heroin is because if the person calls the ambulance and says this person's having a heroin overdose, they're going to immediately be questioned if they're also doing heroin and why they know this. And then they could go to jail for it. And so they're not going to call the police or the ambulance because then they're going to get sent to prison for life. So then they oftentimes will just let the person die. And not necessarily willingly, but it's like, what else are they going to do in that situation? And it's probably very traumatizing. And so my whole proposal to help with this issue is slightly inspired by some of Canada's policies, from what I remember. And the other thing that causes a lot of death with heroin is just unsanitary use, dirty needles. And the thing is like, the thing about the dirty needles isn't the fact that it's stabbed into someone and taken out. It's the fact that when you pull the needle out, there's still some of that person's blood stuck in the nose of the needle. And when you inject into you after someone else used it, you're injecting their blood into your blood, which obviously creates really big issues. So that is another thing. And so in Canada, they have two ways to help with it. One of them was, since you can't just take heroin away from heroin addicts, or they will just be in agonizing pain and it'll cause damage, you have to wean them off. Like, you have to let them keep using heroin until they're at a point where they can stop using heroin, like in smaller and smaller doses. And so what...
Can't cold turkey it.
Exactly. And so what they have in Canada are these like facilities where they have like clean heroin use, where it's like heroin that's not dirty and like thrown together, like we were talking about the other day, like the whole kitchen sink, and also the needles are clean. It's like a sanitary environment. So yes, they're still doing this harmful drug, but they're doing it in a safe environment where they're monitored and it's sanitary. And the other thing is, and I don't remember if Canada actually does this or if this was one of my proposals to help the problem, but I was basically saying we need to have a Good Samaritan's law when it comes to drug use. And that means, you know, the Good Samaritan law?
I don't.
Where I'm pretty sure it's like if you call an ambulance to save someone's life, but you've committed the crime to cause that I'm actually kind of fuzzy on it, so I guess I could look it up. But essentially, in the context of the drug thing, it's the opposite of the problem I was saying, where the person calling the ambulance can't be charged for the evidence of them calling the police or calling the ambulance for the person having the seizure. So if they're very clearly on heroin and they call an ambulance for their friend who's having a stroke, they can't be charged because clearly they're on heroin. Because of that evidence, they'd have to find other evidence to charge them with, if that makes sense. Let me look up Good Samaritan law.
And while you're looking that up and still talking about drugs,
yeah,
another interesting one, and I'd recommend this for anyone listening to watch it. So just like type in Jordan Peterson on YouTube and go to his YouTube channel.
Mm-hmm.
His most recent video was an interview with him and his daughter. His daughter interviewed him. And basically the interview is just about, you know, what's Jordan Peterson been up to.
Mm-hmm.
And Jordan Peterson talked about it because his wife had cancer, and they thought, like, originally they thought they beat it, but then it came back. So then his wife had to get like more treatment done, and he was like just really stressed out because his wife's dying.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think it's benzodiazepines he was taking for his anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
And after the whole thing got cleared up with his wife, he tried to, or at some point he just tried to stop taking the benzodiazepines. So he tried to cold turkey it.
Mm.
And then during the process of him cold turkeying it, he went into a state called akathisia or akathisia. I don't remember what it's called. It's either akathisia or akathisia. And he described it as, I think he either said a needle was like being branded with like an iron pole or whatever that's like hot.
Oh yeah.
As he could just like feel that 24/7. He couldn't sleep. He was in constant pain.
Yeah.
The only thing he could do was walk around to try to distract himself. He couldn't sit still.
Mm-hmm.
And like walking around didn't help the pain. It was just something to do.
Yeah.
And so he literally couldn't do anything as he's in this state of akathisia.
Mm-hmm.
And the only thing to stop it was to take the benzodiazepines.
Uh-huh.
And it was interesting because then there were other stories. Because the reason why this kind of broke out is because, you know, he's in the spotlight. People know him.
Mm-hmm.
Now there's other stories where people have had a benzodiazepine addiction for like years. and where people like would try to cut it off, and they would just go in their backyard and walk around all day in their backyard, literally not doing anything else because of how much pain they're in.
Yeah.
And from what Jordan Peterson or Michaela Peterson said, they said it only takes like 2 weeks of taking before you develop an addiction to it, and then you immediately. And like, from what I understood, there's also people that stopped taking it and had no side effects, and they immediately stopped.
Right.
But there's enough people for it's like that's it's a problem. It's not like oh, it was just him specifically.
Right.
It's still an amount of people that try to stop taking it that just really get shit on.
Really affected by the withdrawals.
Where it's like he can't live that way.
With heroin, they did a test on it where they strapped the patients down and didn't give them heroin, obviously. And then I think it was after like 4 hours, they started like getting withdrawals and like convulsing and having like muscle spasms and like couldn't stop like trying to pull out of the restraints and like shaking. And it got to the point where like some of them couldn't breathe. And like some people actually had, I don't remember what it was, whether it was like a stroke or an aneurysm or something. They died due to the amount of stress on their body because they were having such intense withdrawals because their brain had become so reliant on it that like they just couldn't survive without it. And I think that's like the main thing is like if you just throw someone in prison who's like way too deep into the heroin addiction because it compounds on itself, you just throw them into prison, they're probably gonna go crazy or they're gonna die.
Well, like the only way he was able to get off of it, he went to a hospital in Russia because apparently this Russian doctor said, "Oh, I've treated people with this problem before."
Right.
And in the interview, like his daughter, like one of the Russian guards, or I think it was a Russian nurse, went up to his daughter and was like, "Why'd you bring him here? Like, this is where people die because no one leaves."
Oh.
And so, like, that's obviously not like you're in fucking Russia.
Yeah.
And you're in some fucking hospital. And she described it. It's like one of those movies where like you have these like Soviet guards with AKs that stand outside, and like you're only allowed to visit for like 2 hours at a specific time before like everything like closes down. You're not allowed to come in.
Yeah.
And the only way that he was able to get off, they like sedated him for like a week or two or something. So like he was just he was sleeping, he was unconscious. That was how they got him off of it. They sedated him.
Yeah. So his mind couldn't. Anyways, especially you said it was for his anxiety.
Yeah, it was for his anxiety because his wife was dying.
Oh man,
from cancer. And
this is Jordan Peterson, the guy that you would never think, considering how calm he feels.
He talked about and reflected on it. He's like, I should have known this would probably happen because at some point he did a paper on like alcohol, drugs, like a specific type of drug, and benzodiazepine was like something he knew about.
Right.
And he's like, I should have known beforehand. I took that.
But you can be in a vulnerable state and just want help.
Yeah, like that's obviously, looking back on it, because again, in the moment, I'm from outsider looking in, like you're stressed out, your wife's dying, you don't know what the fuck to do, so maybe you just take it. You have
no control. I think that's the biggest thing is, and I think that's what would get me. And I was talking about this on the last episode where my fear of death isn't like anything other than a lack of control.
Yeah.
And I think that if you're witnessing someone else going through that and you have no ability to do anything about the situation, like you have no power.
Yeah.
I can definitely see how that would like just drive someone like into like extreme anxiety. Like that's got to be terrifying.
See, the thing as you said, you're like, you wouldn't like, you don't think Jordan Peterson, maybe something like that could have been avoided.
Right.
Because, after that whole situation happened, people came out and criticized him and be like, oh, like,
what?
Because like he's always had people that didn't like him.
Yeah.
And people were using this as an example of like, oh, you're full of shit. You know what the fuck you're talking about, blah, blah, blah.
Mm-hmm.
So what he said was like, like the lectures he gives that are complicated, that he walks through that are, hour or 2 hour long lectures on, a topic or two.
Mm-hmm.
Like he said, and I just watched the interview because he talks about it, but basically it was just saying like, he's saying I was never above anyone. Like,
right.
All this information was for everyone, including myself, for all of us to learn. It wasn't me trying to flex on you guys or trying
put
to
himself above,
trying to show any superiority. It was just simply conversation for everyone to hear,
right,
and for everyone to learn from. And again, that includes himself, because I think a lot of us also forget, like, we're all humans. That's the hard part to remember. And it's like, it's in these crazy, bizarre situations where it really shines, where it's like, oh, you are a human. Because I'm sure plenty of people...
It's humanizing for him to go through a struggle, and then people are like, well, he actually, like, nothing's wrong with him. And then it's like, oh.
Yeah.
He actually goes through the same things I go through.
Because, a lot of people are good at it. Like idolizing, putting someone on a pedestal, thinking so high and mighty of them.
Yeah.
And I think it could be easy for everyone to forget. It's like, oh, right. He's a human being that a lot of...
Everyone has their own demons.
Yeah. It's like a lot of things went wrong. He wasn't Superman or anything. And just, shit hit the fan.
Yeah.
Because, again, I think a lot of people also forget, like, speaking of tragedy, yourself, quote unquote, better than
anybody,
other people do.
Mm-hmm.
And people argue that. But as you were saying about the vulnerabilities and stuff like that, like, you're probably the best at knowing what you're afraid of, your vulnerabilities.
Yeah.
But to an outsider, it's like, I wasn't even thinking of that. I haven't even thought about that, like what you're thinking about, whatever it could be.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I'd call it an ego, but again, I just think it's something a lot of people forget.
I think it's the biggest factor, I'd say, is empathy. If you can empathize with someone's situation and have the ability to kind of place yourself in their point of view, walk a mile in their shoes, as they say, it's way easy for you to come from a place of understanding as opposed to a place of competition, I guess. That's not the right word, but contradiction is what I meant to say. But I think even just like that Jordan Peterson thing, where it's like, at least for me, I never really had like a strong opinion either way on Jordan Peterson. I just know that you have shown me some of his talks. But even now, like, just hearing the story of like, oh, I can empathize with the fact that he has struggles and he's not just one note. Like, this is like, everyone's way more deep than you ever can possibly know, especially over the internet. And this kind of relates back to what we were talking about in the society episode of people are so like disconnected from their own emotion, from their own sense of empathy, that they can't bring themselves to like even consider how the other person is feeling or what they're doing or why they're doing things. They just come from a place of, I can say this, no one can stop me, and it doesn't really matter because it's the internet. But then you get in a one-on-one situation, you can read people and you could say something and that visibly hurts their feelings, and you're like, oh. Unless you're a horrible person and you just enjoy making people upset because you're so dead inside. But like, I'd say I'd like to think most people have that sense of empathy when they're in a one-on-one human interaction as opposed to an online human interaction. Like, it's a totally different scenario, and I think the factor of it is the empathy and the ability to like empathize with people's situations, and even sympathy, but sympathy is more like pity, I think, is the difference between the two, and empathy is feeling the same emotion.
I should know this, but I don't.
And I think, and it's funny, I've been learning a lot about personality stuff because of this thing I'm editing at work. And it's just interesting because everyone has their own strengths.
Mm-hmm.
And some people have a strength in empathy, and some people have a strength in like logistical thinking. And a good tell is if someone, say, watches a movie and there's two people in a room and one of them starts crying at an emotional scene in the movie and the other one doesn't. But the one who doesn't still understands and recognizes and feels the emotion, but they don't have as strong of a connection to, like, the person who is crying probably has something they're relating it to. They watch a scene in a movie and they're like, oh, that's just like my situation. And then it like really hits home, and then they start to internalize it and become emotional about it, because that's essentially what empathy is taking someone else's situation and kind of putting yourself in that situation and being like, okay, I can feel this. I can feel why you feel this. Like, where sympathy is like, oh, I'm sorry you feel that way. Like, and maybe that's not entirely accurate in the sympathy side, but I just feel like when you can empathize with someone's story or a hardship that they're going through, it's so much easier to be like, okay, I'm okay to excuse something I don't like about you, because there's at least some common ground we have, which is our human emotion.
Yeah, well, we are, I'd say we're pretty divided right now.
Mm-hmm.
In America.
Very much.
Maybe we've been this divided before. I don't know.
Because we're kind of just coming into this whole social consciousness as we get older.
Yeah. Like in high school, middle school, I'm not looking at the news, being like, oh, how's it going? Like,
yeah,
analyzing how everyone's interacting.
Right.
But now, looking at it, this is going back to your empathizing.
Mm-hmm.
And Charles Bukowski, in one of his poems, he talked about, like, he's like, oh, people who preach religion need religion the most. People who preach this need that the most, was the whole concept.
Yep.
And I've seen people both online and in videos through like Reddit or YouTube where they're empathizing about one side. And then as soon as the other side is introduced, they light them the fuck up and treat them like complete dog shit.
Yeah.
And it just reminds me of Bukowski. It's like, oh, like how ironic that this person is preaching about all this stuff.
But they don't.
But then
they don't practice what they preach.
That, and then like you can literally see it happen in front of me, where it's like the switch immediately turns and they went from empathizing and all this other stuff, do a complete 180, and do the exact opposite of what they were just talking about. And so it just reminds me of, again, Bukowski being like, oh, people who preach religion, they need it the most. People who preach this, they need it the most.
Right. And it's hard, but when you're in a position of influence or leadership, you have to lead by example. You have to do the thing you're telling other people to do, or they're not going to believe in it. They're not going to believe that this thing should be done if the person telling them to do it doesn't even do it.
He's like, see, then I think we get into this gray area, like Singapore. Mm-hmm. Are they wrong for caning and leaving people deformed?
If it works.
It's like,
yeah. Like, and that, okay, to be clear, I don't agree with beating other people, but
I don't either.
But the thing is like, the whole point is, the whole discussion is like, if people, because everyone's like, don't lead by fear, don't control with fear. But then the counter argument is, well, fear works. But then it's like, then you're not living your life properly. You're living in a life of fear. You're not living in a life of happiness, I guess, or anything. So it's hard because humans are innately self-driven. and selfish, and it's for a reason. It's for survival.
Well, it's interesting because like the whole Stanford prison experiment, which I kind of wish went longer to see more what would have happened. But do you know what that is?
Sounds familiar, but I don't know.
So basically in Stanford, they got a bunch of students and they just role played as, like 50% were prisoners and 50% were like the prison guards.
Okay.
Something like that. I don't know the exact numbers, but that was the gist of it. And the students that became prison guards basically like started immediately abusing their power.
Oh,
and started treating the prisoners shitty.
Yeah.
And so then, like, I think, like, the experiment was supposed to last, like, for quite a while, but they cut it so short because they're like, oh, like,
this is not working.
like, well, because they were just concerned of, like, the ethical reasons. They're like, this is unethical.
Oh.
They're being treated like shit. We have to stop it right now.
Especially
so they stopped it immediately. And that's one critique with people that make about the Stanford prison experiment is how unethical it was. Because I think we talked about this at some point, like human experimentation.
Yep.
We talked about it a while ago.
That's first episode.
Where, experimenting with humans is a very touchy subject.
Yep.
And so like, because that wasn't even drugs or anything. This was like a social thing.
Right.
This was a social experiment that was considered unethical. And so they stopped it. I wish they went longer, honestly, even though it was fucked up, because it was the importance of these people with power immediately gravitated towards abusing it.
Like instantly.
And I was like, that's very interesting.
Humans. Okay. Well, that's funny because history does not lie. And every single example in history shows that humans are just driven by power.
Yeah, like, it also seems the easy thing. Like, you have this power, and I would think, like...
Oh, thank you, Siri.
I think it's easier... it certainly requires less willpower to not abuse your power, I think is the right way to put it. It's like eating candy or eating, like, your favorite food. Like, it'd be easier to eat it than to not do it. And so I would think when you're in a position of power, like, oh, I could do this right now, and that's what you want to do. And it's like, why do you want to do it? I don't fucking know why you want to do it. But
yeah,
when you want to do something, it's obviously, quote unquote, harder to not do it.
If you guys want to understand why Star Wars is such an important cultural milestone, there's literally a exchange of words that is, you don't understand the true power that you could achieve using the dark side of the Force. And then whoever was the light side person was like, I'm more powerful than you will ever be because I can resist that temptation.
Yeah, and see, again, I told you that, like, during my communications class, I was so close to doing about Star Wars, because you can make Star Wars so philosophical.
It's true
about the light and the dark,
because it's based in the battle of good and evil.
Yeah, which again, it's a lot of good stuff, as you were saying.
And they as of recent times, they're delving into the gray area where it's like maybe it's not so clear cut, black and white, good versus evil. It's pretty good.
See, I would love a Star Wars series, book, not a book or comic, because I never fucking read those.
Same.
Maybe game. So, like, basically game or movie or series. But I just think it'd be cool if they could have, like, a good dark side user from his perspective.
A sympathetic view.
Yeah, well, like...
Or empathetic. Well, no, that'd be sympathy.
Yeah, like, and I'm saying dark side users because, like, usually, like,
it's always from
the light side. Well, are all Sith bad? Because I don't know if all Sith are quote unquote bad.
There's Sith and there's dark side users, and there's a difference because the Sith are part of this cult, and they're essentially nothing but evil. But Darth Maul started as a Sith, but then he wasn't a Sith Lord. He was just an assassin, and so by the time in Rebels, right before A New Hope, he's not a Sith. He's just a dark side user filled with vengeance.
Yeah. Well, I actually got confused. Like, I meant to say difference between Sith and Darth.
Darth is just a title.
Yeah, because I don't think all people that had Darth were necessarily bad.
No.
Because
no, Darth Maul, for the exact example I was just saying, yeah.
Well, like, also, like, because in the comics, I think he was a Darth. He might not have been. Momin, do you remember Momin?
Yeah.
The one with the helmet?
Yep.
Who was saying, like, Vader was wrong.
Yeah.
And how he's trying to command the dark side. He said that was wrong.
Yeah.
Which I like that.
Bend the Force to his will.
Yeah.
Yeah. Welcome to the Star Wars podcast.
But anyways, I just think it'd be really awesome if they had some sort of dark side user that people didn't know was a dark side user,
right?
Who was good, but then maybe something slips out where he does, like, I don't know, force choke, force lightning for a good reason,
right? And
then you could see the good guys treat him like shit and be like, oh, now the good guys look like the bad guys, and the quote unquote bad guy looks like the good guy because he was using the dark side for a good reason, and all of a sudden the good people are now being the bad people.
Labeling him. Yeah. And I think that would be a really interesting, which is why I think we're moving more towards that. I hope the next era is kind of like more explorative in the in-between areas, because we're already kind of moving that way.
Mm-hmm.
Just like, and that's why I think the confrontation between Ahsoka and Darth Maul in the last season of the Clone Wars is like interesting, because Ahsoka was an ex-Jedi.
Yeah.
Darth Maul was an ex-Sith.
Yep.
And they're kind of just both in this weird middle ground where one leaned more towards justice and the
both
other leaned more towards
kicked out
vengeance.
of their order.
Yes. See? Oh, yeah. They even
they
said
were both literally exiled from their order. I guess they actually, one was going to be in prison and one was going to be killed. So
true. Well, here, we'll move back on. Well, I guess we're kind of reaching the end of the episode anyways.
But I was going to mesh it in with like, with order and chaos.
Yeah.
So you could view
either one as the good.
Like, for example, you could view the light side as order, the extreme side being order, and then the extreme side of the dark being chaos.
Mm-hmm.
And when you inherently hear that, you'd be like, oh, chaos is bad, order is good.
Right.
I don't think that's always necessarily the case, because then you could get instances like, so it's like, oh, order is good. It's like, well, what happens when you have too much order? It's like, is that when corruption starts to settle in?
Very much.
And everything gets
too much power. Yeah.
If everything gets so orderly, you could have one person in that hierarchy immediately abuse the power.
Pulling the strings.
Because then we could go back to the Stanford prison experiment. You could give someone so little power in a social experiment. It's like, oh yeah, I'm going to abuse that. I'm going to abuse this power you gave me in a social experiment.
You see it in day-to-day life. People who have a power complex becoming managers or bosses at just like small franchise restaurants or stores, and they're instantly like,
man,
you're gonna do this because I said so, and that's why.
Yeah, because we could dive into so much more as well, because we could also talk about because like it's easy to look at a shit person and be like, oh man, that person's so shitty, and hate on them.
Right.
This goes back to being our human talk.
The easy versus...
You could have also been them is also the thing. Because Jordan Peterson talks about, like, if let's just say the whole town of Boise, let's say all these people grew up in Nazi Germany, there's a good chance majority of the population would have been Nazis growing up in those conditions.
Interesting, yeah.
We believing that Jews really are bad people.
Right. Like, just because that's the societal norm. The other thing is that kind of ties back to it's easy to eat the piece of candy than to oppose the piece of candy. You could even say that for people who perceive themselves as the good people and labeling the bad people. You know what's hard to do as a good person? Empathize with a bad person.
Yep.
And forgive them. Now, one disclaimer here. There are very clearly evil people who don't deserve forgiveness. But if you're in a situation where like you just got to be able to tap into that, and then if you really tap into it, be like, it's impossible for me to empathize with this person, then you know. But like, it's different than just like, oh, I heard you did this thing, you're bad. That's like, anyways, that's its own whole discussion. But
yeah, that's why I was wanting to refrain from it, going order to chaos, and then talking about growing up in conditions and turning into that. But I was just like, I'll just throw it in there real quick.
And who knows, maybe we could elaborate on more. But every time we say we're going to talk about one topic, we're not even close to it by the end. So
that's all right.
Maybe, yeah. But anyways, yeah, I think that was pretty good. I don't know specifically how long it's been.
I don't either.
I think it's been an hour because I think we started around this time an hour ago.
I don't even know when I got here.
Anyways, do you have anything else to add before we go?
I don't.
Okay. Well, we'll see you on the next one. Thanks for listening. Don't forget, we've got all the social medias just in our Headspace podcast. I think Facebook or Twitter, it's IOHS podcast. Same on Instagram. But I think if you just search the name, it's still there. So
we pop up on YouTube now.
It's true. When you search us on YouTube, we're there. I think it's because we're actually uploading and people are interacting. So anyways, check us out. Support. You can give us suggestions. Still haven't gotten any suggestions yet. But super willing to talk about suggested topics. Just keep it interesting, kind of spice it up. And yeah, anyways, thank you for watching, and bye-bye.